I'm Linda, 27, female. I live in a quiet suburban town, working as a forensic accountant. It's a job I'm good at, numbers don't lie, and I find a strange comfort in the logic and order of a balance sheet. My life has always been about structure, about making sure everything adds up. It's a stark contrast to my younger sister, Sarah, who lives her life in a chaotic, colorful blur for her social media followers. Our father, Robert, always said I was the spreadsheets and she was the sparkle, but when he passed away, I discovered that behind that sparkle, my sister was hiding a darkness I could never have imagined. She thought she could steal my future, but she forgot one crucial detail. I ought, at liars for a living. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The day we gathered for the reading of our father's will was cold and gray, a perfect match for the mood in the sterile conference room of his lawyer, Mark Davis. Mark had been our father's lawyer and friend for decades, a kind man with tired eyes who now looked at Sarah and me with profound pity. I sat stiffly, clutching a tissue, my mind still a fog of grief. Dad's illness had been sudden, and his loss felt like a physical weight on my chest. Sarah, on the other hand, was already dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, her quiet sobs perfectly timed. She was dressed in expensive, looking tasteful black, every inch the grieving daughter. I, in my practical pantsuit, just felt numb. Robert was a very organized man, and Mark began adjusting his glasses. He was very clear about his wishes. He opened the large envelope. I expected a straightforward split. We were his only children. He had always treated us fairly, even if we were polar opposites. I was the responsible one, the one who helped him with his taxes and investments. Sarah was the free spirit, the one who always needed a few $100s to tide her over until her next brand deal came through. Dad had supported her dream of being a social media manager, though I knew he worried about her lack of stability. To my daughter, Linda, Mark read, and my heart clenched. I leave my collection of classic novels and my sincere gratitude for her steady hand and loving heart. I know she has built a wonderful life for herself, and I am so proud of the woman she has become. I blinked. That was it, books. I loved those books, but... Mark cleared his throat, his eyes flicking to me with an unreadable expression before continuing. To my daughter, Sarah, I leave the entirety of my estate. This includes the family home, all liquid assets, investment portfolios, and personal effects. It is my wish that she uses this to build a secure and lasting future. The room fell silent. I could hear the buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. Sarah let out a loud, shuddering gasp, covering her mouth as if in total shock. "Oh, Daddy," she whispered, fresh tears rolling down her cheeks. I don't understand why. I couldn't breathe, the entire estate, everything. We were talking about a portfolio worth well over $1 million, plus the house I grew up in. It made no sense. My father would never do this. He knew Sarah. He loved her, but he knew she was irresponsible. He would never leave her in sole control of everything. He had always promised us both that we would be taken care of equally. "Mark," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "that can't be right. There must be a mistake. A different version." Mark Davis looked down at the document, his face grim. "Linda, this is the final, notarized will, signed by your father 3 weeks ago. It's perfectly legal and binding. I was surprised as well, but the signature is his, and it was properly witnessed." Sarah rushed over to me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. "Oh, Linda, I'm just as shocked as you are. I don't know why he would do this. Don't worry, I'll take care of you. Of course I will. We're sisters." Her perfume was cloying, and her embrace felt cold. I stared past her at the signature line on the document Mark was holding. Something was wrong, terribly, fundamentally wrong. My father, a man of meticulous habits, would never have made such a drastic, hurtful decision without so much as a word to me. As Sarah continued her performance of the shocked and burdened heiress, a different feeling began to cut through my grief, suspicion, and as I looked at my sister, my pretty, charming, manipulative sister, that suspicion began to solid rock into certainty. The weeks that followed were a blur. Sarah moved into the family home immediately, posting long, emotional videos about honoring our father's legacy and grieving in the house he loved. Her follower count soared. She was the tragic, beautiful daughter left to carry the family burden. She called me constantly, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Linda, are you sure you're okay? You can come by the house anytime, you know. Our house. Well, my house now, but you know what I mean." Linda, I'm thinking of redecorating the study. Dad's old desk is just so drab, don't you think? Linda, I'm paying for the funeral from the estate, of course. Don't you worry your pretty little head about a thing. Every word was a perfectly sharpened knife. I moved into a small, sterile apartment. My father's books stacked in boxes I couldn't bring myself to unpack. I tried to go back to work, but I couldn't focus. The numbers on my screen blurred. All I could see was that signature on the will. I had asked Mark for a copy, and I stared at it for hours every night. It looked like my father's signature, the loops, the slant. It was almost perfect, but almost is the word a forensic accountant leaves by. My father had a specific habit. When he signed his full name, Robert Miller, the T in Robert was always crossed with a slight upward tilt, a remnant from a calligraphy class he took in college. This signature was flat, perfectly horizontal. It was a tiny detail, so tiny anyone would miss it. Anyone except me. I started digging. I told myself I was just processing my grief, but I knew it was more. I was opening an investigation. My sister, the social media manager, wasn't exactly a master of discretion. Her life was an open book, and I started reading. She had posted a photo of herself at a lavish vineyard brunch with my amazing team, 2 days before our father's final decline. The date on the post, it was the exact date the new will was supposedly signed. I referenced the notary on the will. His name was unfamiliar. A quick search showed he operated out of a small mail service shop 2 towns over. Why would Dad go there? Mark's office had notaries. The final piece clicked into place when I was sorting through my own bank statements, getting my finances in order for my new, smaller life. I saw a charge from 3 months ago, a birthday dinner I had taken Dad to. I had kept the receipt for my budget, and he had signed the credit card slip. I pulled it out of my file box. I laid it next to the copy of the will, and there it was, the upward, tilting cross on the T. I compared it again to the will. Flat. My hands were shaking. This wasn't just a suspicion. It was proof. My sister, while our father was in the hospital, slipping in and out of consciousness, hadn't been grieving. She had been busy. She had found a way to get a new will created. She had faked his signature. She hadn't just taken the money. She had stolen our father's final words, his last act of love, and twisted it into a lie. The grief that had paralyzed me instantly evaporated, replaced by a cold, clear, calculating rage. She may have been the creative one, but I was the one who knew how to audit a fraud. I needed more than a gut feeling and a differently crossed T. A court would call it circumstantial. I needed irrefutable proof. I needed to know how she did it, and for that, I needed to follow the money. Sarah was smart, but she was also sloppy. Her entire life was built on image, not substance. I knew her passwords. We'd shared a streaming account for years, and she used the same Sparkle Sarah 88 for everything. It was arrogant, and it was about to be her downfall. I logged into her bank account. At first, it just looked like she was on a massive spending spree, thousands at designer boutiques, a down payment on a flashy new convertible, a vacation to Bali, which she'd posted about as a healing journey to find myself after my tragic loss. But I wasn't looking at the new money. I was looking for transactions from before Dad died. I scrolled back, past the influencers, sponsored posts, and the brunch pictures, and then I found it. A series of small, strange cash withdrawals. $200 here, $300 there, all from an ATM near the mail, service shop where the will was notarized, and then a larger transaction, a bank transfer for $10,000 to a consulting agency I'd never heard of, Legacy Services LLC. The date was 2 days after Dad was first admitted to the ICU. I ran a business search on Legacy Services LLC. It was a shell corporation, registered just 1 day before that transfer. The registered agent, a man whose name I didn't recognize, but the address? The address was the same mail, service shop. This was the notary. This was the witness. This was the entire conspiracy, bundled up in a single transaction. My heart was pounding. This was it. She had paid someone $10,000 to help her forge a will. She had drained her own savings to do it, a desperate gamble that she would soon have $1 million estate to refill it. I saved everything, screenshots, bank statements, the business registration details. I saved them to an encrypted hard drive, then to a cloud server, then to another hard drive I mailed to a safety deposit box I'd opened under a new name, but I still wasn't done. I had the how. Now I needed the what else. I logged into our father's investment accounts, which Sarah now controlled. She hadn't just been spending, she had been liquidating. She was cashing out stocks, bonds, and mutual funds our father had spent 30 years building. The market was down. She was selling at a massive loss, hemorrhaging value just to get the cash in her hands. She had no idea what she was doing. She was just a dragon sitting on a pile of gold, setting it on fire just to watch it burn. She wasn't just stealing my inheritance. She was destroying our father's entire legacy out of pure, frantic greed. I closed the laptop, my mind a steel trap. I wasn't just going to take her to court. A civil suit would be messy, public, and she could tie it up in appeals for years. No, I was an accountant. I dealt with numbers, and I knew something she didn't: tax law. She had just inherited a massive estate. She had also just received a $10,000 service payment that she clearly hadn't declared, and she was liquidating assets left and right, creating a cascade of capital gains events she almost certainly didn't understand. She thought she had won. She had no idea she was about to be audited by the one person on earth who knew all her secrets. My apartment transformed. What was once a grieving daughter's refuge became a forensic accountant's war room. I pinned printouts of bank statements to my walls. I created flowcharts mapping the movement of money from my father's accounts to Sarah's, then out to her car payments and designer splurges. I cross-referenced everything with her social media posts. Here was a photo of her new $5,000 handbag, time-stamped, and here was the matching charge on the Amex linked to the estate. Here was her spontaneous trip to Miami, and here was the $15,000 wire transfer from the liquidated mutual fund to pay for the private villa. I wasn't just tracking her spending, I was building a case. My first official move was to contact Mark Davis. I sat in his office, the same one where my life had fallen apart, and I laid out my findings. Not the suspicions, but the cold, hard data. Mark, I said, my voice even, I'm not here as a grieving daughter. I'm here as an accountant. My sister is systematically liquidating our father's portfolio at a significant loss. Mark sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Linda, as the sole executor, she has the legal right to do so. It's unwise, but it's not illegal. I know. I said. I pushed a file across the desk. This is a $10,000 payment from her personal account to a shell corporation registered at this address. I handed him the business filing, and this is the address of the notary on the will. A will you yourself said was unusual. Mark's eyes widened. He read the documents, his expression shifting from pity to sharp, professional focus. In this, I continued, is a signature comparison. This is Dad's signature from a credit card receipt 3 months ago. Note the T in Robert. I pointed with my pen. See the upward tilt, and this is the will. The T is flat. It's an excellent forgery, but it's not his. Mark was silent for a full minute. He looked from the papers to me, and his gaze was no longer pitying. It was impressed. My God, Linda, he whispered, you're right. She paid $10,000 to have a fraudulent will created and notarized. I said, my voice hardening. She committed fraud, but that's not what I'm here for. A criminal case would be difficult. It's my word against hers. She would play the victim. It would destroy our family name. Then what are you here for? Mark asked. I'm here for the estate. She is not a responsible executor. She is violating her fiduciary duty by willfully destroying the estate's value. I want you to file an emergency petition with the probate court to have her removed as executor and to freeze the assets, pending a full investigation. Mark leaned back, a slow, grim smile spreading across his face. That is a much stronger angle. We can argue she's acting against the intent of the will, even the fraudulent one, by acting with such gross negligence. Exactly, I said. It will freeze her. It will stop the bleeding. And while she's frozen, I'm going to take a different path. What path? I stood up, gathering my files. Sarah just inherited over $1 million. She's also been gifting herself tens of thousands of dollars from the estate accounts. She's selling assets and creating complex tax events, and I'm willing to bet my entire career she hasn't declared a single cent of it. I looked Mark in the eye. She thinks this is a family drama. She has no idea she's about to be on the receiving end of a full federal audit, and I'm the one who's going to give the IRS the anonymous tip. The first part of the plan went off perfectly. Mark Davis, armed with my evidence of gross mismanagement, filed the petition. A judge, seeing the rapid liquidation of assets at a loss, agreed that the estate was in jeopardy and signed an emergency order. All of the estate's assets were frozen, effective immediately. Sarah got the notice on a Friday, right in the middle of a spa day. She was live streaming to her followers. I know because I watched it. She glanced at the email notification on her phone, her smile faltering for just a second before she giggled and told her audience, "Ugh, just boring lawyer stuff." 2 hours later, her credit card was declined at the spa. Her call to me was frantic, hysterical. "Linda, they've frozen everything, the bank, the investment accounts, even Dad's credit card. Mark said you filed something. How could you do this to me? I'm just trying to manage everything. It's so stressful." I kept my voice perfectly calm, almost bored. "Sarah, you were selling off assets at a 30% loss. That's not managing, that's destroying." The court agreed. They've frozen the accounts until a formal review can be done. "A review? What does that mean? I have bills to pay. I have my car payment. I have that trip to Greece booked. I guess you'll have to cancel them," I said, "or pay for them with your own money." "My own money?" she shrieked. "I don't have any. I used my savings for other things. You did this. You're just jealous. Dad wanted me to have this. The court will decide what Dad wanted," I said, and I hung up. Phase 1 was complete. Sarah was cut off from her golden goose. She was now trapped in a massive house with no income, a new car she couldn't afford, and a lifestyle that cost $10,000 a month to maintain. Now, for Phase 2. I spent the next 2 weeks compiling a file. It was a work of art. I detailed the $10,000 legacy services payment as undeclared income. I cataloged every gift she had taken from the estate as taxable distributions. But the real masterpiece was the capital gains. She had sold stocks not knowing that their cost basis was what Dad had paid for them decades ago. She had sold $200,000 in stock, thinking she just had $200,000. She had no idea she had just created a $180,000 taxable gain. I bundled every transaction, every date, every account number. I wrote a long, detailed, anonymous letter, posing as a concerned financial professional who had stumbled upon a client's blatant tax evasion. I detailed the shell corporation, the asset liquidation, the commingling of personal and estate funds. I mailed the thick envelope to the IRS whistleblower office. I knew it could take months, even years, for them to act. But that was fine. I could wait. The probate court freeze was already strangling her. She was hemorrhaging money she didn't have. The creditors would come first. The taxman would come last, and he would take whatever was left. 3 months later, Sarah's carefully curated world was a smoking ruin. She had missed 2 payments on her convertible. It was repossessed. She'd tried to sell her new designer bags online, but it wasn't enough. The bank had started foreclosure proceedings on the house. Her social media, once a stream of sunny brunches, had become dark and erratic, full of vague posts about betrayal and fake people. Her followers were dwindling. The probate court, after reviewing my evidence, had officially removed her as executor. They had appointed a neutral third-party administrator to manage the estate, and Mark had successfully filed a motion to have the fraudulent will contested, using my signature analysis as the primary evidence. The case was moving forward, but the final blow came on a Tuesday. I got a call from a hysterical Sarah. "Linda, you have to help me. There are men at the door. They're from the IRS. They say I owe them money. They're talking about liens and fraud. They said something about an audit." I sipped my coffee. "An audit? Gosh, Sarah, that sounds serious. What could it be about?" "I don't know," she wailed. "They're asking about legacy services. They're asking about the stock sales. You're an accountant, Linda. You have to fix this. Tell them it's a mistake." "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding," I said calmly. "Just show them your records, your income statements, your capital gains worksheets. You do have those, right?" There was a long, terrible silence on the other end of the line. What? I don't know what those are." "Oh, Sarah," I said, and for the first time I let the ice in my voice show. "You inherited $1 million estate. You sold off hundreds of thousands in assets. You accepted a $10,000 payment for a service you never declared. Did you really think you didn't have to pay taxes on any of it? Taxes." Her voice was a tiny squeak. "Capital gains tax, income tax, and when they find out about the fraud, which they will, tax fraud penalties and interest. Lots and lots of interest. You did this," she screamed. "This was you told them. I just followed the numbers, Sarah," I said. "You're the one who cooked the books. You forged our father's name. You stole my half of the inheritance, and you spat on his memory by burning through his life's work. You just weren't smart enough to cover your tracks." I continued, my voice cold and steady as a ledger. You're going to lose the house, Sarah. The IRS will take everything to cover what you owe, and when the probate court rules the will is fraudulent, and you'll legally owe me my half of the estate, which you've already spent. You're not just broke, Sarah. You're in a hole so deep you'll never climb out. I heard a dry, racking sob. She wasn't the sparkling influencer anymore. She was just a desperate, stupid girl who had been caught. You ruined me, she whispered. No, I said, and I hung up the phone. You ruined yourself. I just did the math. It took another 6 months to finalize everything. The probate court officially invalidated the forged will, reverting to our father's previous will, which, as I had always known, split the estate evenly between us. The third-party administrator had salvaged what was left of the portfolio, but it was much smaller thanks to Sarah's fire sale. The IRS, however, was not so forgiving. They seized all of Sarah's assets. The house was sold at auction, her bank accounts were emptied, the inheritance she had tried to steal was gone, vaporized by her own greed and the government's penalties. Her final legal bill was staggering. She owed the estate for the value she had lost. She owed the IRS for the taxes she had evaded, and she owed me personally for my share of the stolen money. She declared bankruptcy. I last saw her working as a cashier at a local grocery store, her designer clothes replaced by a faded blue uniform. Her hair was stringy, her nails were broken. She saw me, and her eyes, once so bright and manipulative, were just empty. She looked away, her face burning with a shame that was far more potent than any prison sentence. As for me, I used my share of the inheritance to do what Dad would have wanted. I set up a small foundation in his name offering financial literacy scholarships to young people. I kept his books, and I bought a small, modest house with a garden. I still work as an accountant. I still find comfort in the logic of numbers. People lie, emotions are messy, and sisters can betray you. But numbers never lie. They always add up. And in the end, my sister's account was finally perfectly balanced.